Good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening. I love this. I always go good morning and then it's evening, wherever we are in the world. Welcome to the Bee Formless Flow Driven CEO podcast. And this evening we're in Denver, Colorado, and we're here in Melbourne, Australia for me. So it's morning. But I wanted to give a big, huge welcome to Mariah Heller. Good evening, Mariah.
Hi, good to see you.
Yeah, you too. You too. I know we were just talking and I do love where you're from. There's so much like mountains and snow and it's awesome probably it's definitely awesome in the summer, but it's awesome in the winter. And you're heading into probably a really beautiful time. In
Yeah, it's really beautiful right now. Highly recommend.
Highly recommend. Yes. Well, we've got a lot to chat about today on the pod. And let's just get started with the fact that you're a multi-hyphenate, and I had not heard that term before, so I'm super excited to unpack that. Multi-hyphenate entrepreneur, speaker, fitness professional, health advocate, and you're the founder of Pain-Free Fitness. I love the whole notion of pain-free fitness. There's so many ways to unpack that. But it's a company dedicated to helping individuals achieve that sustainable fitness and wellness. And
Yeah.
I'd love you to chat about this and especially those living with chronic pain or injury. We've got so much to unpack in that space. But I'd love to get a bit of a journey of, this your entrepreneurship and how you came to be the founder of Fitness. I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, definitely. I think the journey of pain-free fitness is interesting. I'm gonna try to pack like 15 years into 60
It's
seconds if I
always
can.
the way. Take your time.
Yeah. Um, it has definitely changed shapes several times. So I'll work backwards a little bit. What I do now in my business is I have an e-commerce business in the fitness space.
Mm,
And there's a couple of reasons that I did that. So I manufacture fitness flashcards that have images on the front and then instructions on the back. We have seated exercises, we have stability and balance coming out. And then we also have other kind of classic like fitness, dumbbell, kettlebell, things like that as well.
yeah.
And so that's what we do now. And there's still definitely that mission driven, making fitness more accessible to everybody,
Mm,
making it simple. I think a lot of things that you see on the internet just intimidate people because it's so complicated and
mm,
there's just a lot out there.
mm,
So I wanted to make fitness more accessible, especially for people that maybe feel intimidated or don't feel comfortable in a classic gym setting. The way that pain-free fitness started, though, is I was a trainer and I was dealing with a lot of chronic pain. I've had both of my hips operated on. I had a hernia when I was really young. Like there was just a lot going on with my body that
mm,
my coaches didn't know what it was.
mm,
And so I developed kind of a specialty in working with people that were mobility limited or, had had hip replacements and things
mm,
like that. And that just kind of became my audience. And so over the years, it went from, personal training, and then I kind of I had that emphasis and I was teaching classes and then opened my own gym. And then while I was running the gym, I wrote an ebook, and that's kind of how the first pain-free fitness thing
came
came
about.
about.
Mm.
Yeah. And so, yeah, that I hope that wasn't too confusing. It's
No.
gone through a lot of iterations over the years. So,
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess I'd love to talk about that even as well from an entrepreneur. Like when it's great that you're talking about the fact that your business goes through lots of iterations because we only see what we see, in social media or online or whatever, like you're talking about, even from a fitness perspective. But what people don't
yeah.
see is what actually happens behind the scenes in terms of you might start here, you end up over here, then you come back over here. So I love the fact that that you've talked around openly admitting that there's lots of different iterations because I get the feeling that we quite often try not to talk about the fact that there's all these iterations just to get to the next step, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And I'm sure, I mean, I know you've had your business for a long time and scaled it over that time. And I think like I would love to hear about what this experience has been for you too. But I think there's this misconception that businesses end up in a place because you start kind of having that specific thing in mind.
Mm,
And a lot of the time, I mean, some of the most successful business stories have been people that just kind of wind up finding a path that they didn't even know they were going to be on. And a lot of I mean, just a lot of my earlier years in my business, especially, was me having zero idea what the path forward was. And I would just try to kind of do something that I felt like was positive,
mm.
whether it was making a new connection or even like posting something on social media that day or like something that I felt like would move me forward a little bit.
Yeah, I love
Uh,
that. Yeah,
yeah,
I absolutely love that. Oh my goodness, we've got so much to unpack. So, just to quickly, just to make sure it's clear that it wasn't the last company I was with that I scaled to the 20 million. It wasn't my company as such, but I was the founding partner of the business here in Melbourne.
yeah,
And, you're absolutely right. And I'll talk about that experience, but also then my next experience in terms of that as the business grew or changed, there was a new iteration that came about in the last business I was in terms of, well, when we started with two, we went to five, and then next thing it's like, okay, well, what do we do now? And so you were constantly, as you were scaling or growing, everything was changing. And some days it was like you'd make mistakes, and then other days it was just like you were just on this journey. And so you just pursued it, right? It's like what you say, you take one step at a time. But then when
yeah,
things didn't go the way you'd hoped or imagined, that's when you have to kind of stop and look at it and go, all right, well, where do we need to pivot? Where do we need to shift?
yeah.
And, quite often it was, but we also have to take a calculated risk. And
Mhm.
so what I learned in that experience and in that business was that there were lots of different balls we were juggling at any given time. And it was almost like you'd have them some days all up in the air, which was like I call this organized chaos. This jacket is probably quite suitable for today's conversation, like the Joker, right? Or the juggler.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
then it was just like seeing where balls landed. And it'd be like,
yeah,
some days I'd just be like this, going, oh my God, oh my God, oh my gosh.
yeah,
But it
yeah.
always landed where it was supposed to, if that makes sense.
That's
But in
great.
my new
Yeah.
business that I've started my own company, and it's it'll be 2 years old or young this coming July. I think this is where it's like what you were just talking about then. It's just that each day ensuring you're taking that one step forward and almost
Yeah.
let it go with where it's meant to go versus trying to hold on to an outcome. Um,
Yep.
and so I asked you, I want to put this back onto you. I asked you a question when you signed up for the pod in terms of
Yes.
what's one unique insight or experience in life, leadership, or business that you'd like to
Mhm.
share? And you talked around the emphasis of the power of being a multi-hyphenate entrepreneur and how leaning into each one of your strengths can be the building blocks for a successful career.
Mhm.
Love you to talk a little bit about that because it feels like that's what we're kind of talking about right now. And I thought, oh, that would be a perfect time to chat about that.
Yeah, I took a lot of courses in business and had even coaches and things like that, especially earlier on when I was trying to kind of get my footing. And I will say most of actually, I think maybe all of my coaches were male. So I wonder if this ties on into that a little bit. But there was a really strong focus on f just doing one thing, being one thing, focusing on one thing. And if you do anything other than that, you're going to fail,
Mm,
right?
mm,
And honestly, it was kind of when I stopped doing that that I started to really become successful.
mm,
And I think, when I say multi-hyphenate, I think kind of embracing the different parts of your identity as a business person. So,
mm,
um, I recognized early on that I was a very good trainer, but I was also, I worked a lot of the time as well. And like I was able to bring my strength as a project manager into my businesses. Still very, very heavily rely on that.
Mm.
Um, I was also a very good speaker, and so I started, speaking a lot, and that helped kind of grow my businesses as well. And I met a lot of people through that. Um, and so yeah, it really wasn't until I kind of started to embrace all those parts of myself and make myself bigger as opposed to smaller that I started to gain more success, I would say.
Love that because you're right, actually. Like the amount of times I've been told you need to focus on one thing and do it properly. But
Yeah.
yet I'm the sort of person, and it sounds like we're quite similar in that regard, where it's like I need to be like my personality and my identity is that I do different things. It's not that I have different strengths, right? So how do you actually harness them and
Yeah.
leverage them is what you're talking about, right? So versus yes, you need to be focused. Absolutely. I could not agree more that you need to be focused. But
Mhm.
I've always felt suffocated when I've been told you need to just focus on the one thing and that's, what you need to do. And I get that told that in my current business, but I think because I've got the formless component of my business, which is the shapeless, like the new form and stuff, gives me
Yeah.
the ability to be able to do what you're talking about. And it's super refreshing because you're talking about a way of being an entrepreneur in business that isn't the, dare I say it, traditional way of being, an entrepreneur where where you should just be focusing on the one thing because it's like, well, who says? And you're
Yeah.
proving that you can be super successful.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I think, if anything, I would say so now, just to add some context to what I was about to say, I would define myself now as an entrepreneur. I work in the tech space and
Mm,
then I'm also a musician, right? And so I'm similar. I need to kind of have a lot of different things in the air. I've also honestly, like up until recently, I was never in a position where I could just focus on a business. Like if you think about the paths of businesses, a lot of them don't become profitable until years in.
mm,
So kind of having the privilege of being able to just do that one thing, I think is a bit of it leaves out a whole audience of people that just can't do that.
yeah.
But yeah, I think, I would say it definitely does confuse people when I'm talking to people about it, as far as, when someone asks me, what do you do? Um, I have a lot to say, I have a lot of different things and a lot of different eggs in different baskets, but it's all genuinely going well.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the fallacy is that if you focus on more than one thing, everything's going to fail. And that's just hasn't been true for me.
Mm. And so when you say like you've got text, I was about to say tech,
Yeah.
you're a musician, and then you've obviously got your pain-free fitness. They
Yeah.
almost though they do they not all interconnect in some way, shape, or form? Like you talked around to me prior to the pod, the pain-free fitness and e-commerce. It's really being e-commerce driven. Well, that's tech, right? And then
Yep.
musician for me is that it's your creativity coming out. That gives you that ability to probably get into flow state and be able to kind of come up with ideas and like talk to me a little bit about how they kind of interconnect with each other.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and I think you're spot on. I think they complement each other, and they are also able to be kind of uh, relief from each other as well, if that makes sense.
Mm,
So I think part of the reason I decided to go more toward e-commerce in my day job, or I'm sorry, in the pain-free fitness business was I wanted the business to be a little bit more passive. I also wanted it to be more broadly accessible.
mm,
Um, but my career in tech is also very demanding. And so sometimes having both the e-commerce business and the tech business can be stressful. And so the music and the creativity really allows me to kind of get a reprieve from that. Whereas I feel like if I didn't have a creative outlet, I might be a much angrier person. Um, And you're absolutely right. I mean, I think being working in the software space, being a product slash project manager, and being in e-commerce, very, very tightly connected. And I've been able to, I think, scale the business quicker because I have that experience.
Yeah, absolutely. So talk to us a little bit about the pain-free fitness business in terms of that, it's about empowering your clients to reclaim their physical health without sacrificing the joy or, kind of that sustainable, health. Like talk to us a little bit about that in general.
Yeah. So I would say it is counter to a lot of the traditional fitness culture that fitness has to be a struggle all the
Mm,
time.
mm,
There is definitely some truth to, I think for most people, myself included, it's like probably easier to sit on the couch than it is to do a workout.
mm,
But beyond that, there's this idea that you just have to be in pain all the time and you have to be struggling all the time. And that's something that I really wanted to push up against,
mm.
especially because for the chronic pain community, which is something that I am a member of, just kind of getting there is hard enough,
Mm,
right?
mm,
So the idea of having something that you can genuinely enjoy doing, that's accessible and that's not intimidating, and that you don't feel like you have to be focused on numbers all the time,
mm.
that's the way that I really structured my training with my clients, and it's the way that I've structured my business now as well.
Oh, cool. And yeah, because it's really interesting for me, right? Like, I mean, I was again talking to you before. Like, I'm a fitness, I wouldn't a fitness freak. Yeah, I love being healthy, healthy body, healthy mind, healthy soul. Do you know what I mean? And yeah,
Yeah.
when I look at I'm grateful I haven't had any real chronic pain as such in my time, but I've had injuries, and I know what it's like when you've had a major injury. Broke my ankle, in two different places, etc. And
Yeah.
that is, even that is just getting yourself back into that fitness, etc., and finding the joy in it again in terms of it, rather than it becoming like it became a slog. And I was like, am I ever going to get like fit again, or am I ever going to get healthy again? But where
Yeah.
I'm going with this is that I'm a big believer in active recovery, right? In terms of active recovery, that isn't efforting as such, and that you can find joy in it, and active recovery is for everybody. In terms of that, with the clients you work with, if they
Mhm.
have a chronic injury, is that what you work with them on to find that rather than just kind of going, I can't, I'll just sit on the couch, which isn't a form of active recovery. Is that your way of like working with them as well in terms of getting them into kind of a rhythm where they do see that it is more than just a physical fitness, but it's, a combination of mind and body and reconnecting all of that? I don't know if I'm making sense right now.
Oh, yeah, you're making perfect sense. And yes and yes. That was when I was working with clients one-on-one more, that was always a struggle, right? Because it can be very, especially if you're in a place where your ego is kind of attached to like what your body once was or
Mm,
what you could do.
mm,
It can be very, very sad
mm,
to feel like you can't do the things that you are attaching that ego to anymore, right?
mm,
If I have a lot of my ego built around endurance training or weight training, and then I get a back injury, that can be really hard for people mentally because you do probably have to change the things that you're doing for a little while.
mm,
And so there is definitely an all or nothing mentality that I had to get through with a lot of my clients.
mm,
And I would call it kind of building your movement menu, right? So you kind of start with like the ideal thing is, I'm an endurance athlete and I want to train for a marathon. And then you break your ankle, right?
mm,
And then so you kind of build that menu and it's like, okay, maybe I can do upper body exercises and like planks or something, right? And so kind of figuring out what you can do around that.
mm,
And so treating your body like it's going to be different on a day-to-day, month-to-month, week-to-week basis, I think that's the key when it comes to being in pain and recovering from that.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And talk to me a little bit about, like, obviously you're an entrepreneur, you're across many different businesses. What do you also see with, in the tech space, in your, obviously your pain-free fitness space, but putting your
Mhm.
leader hat on, leadership lens hat on, right? Like, I mean, I openly did, suffer from, severe burnout. And, that was almost like a bit of a chronic pain, a chronic illness, because I was having to recover and not having to, I needed to recover. So I couldn't exercise the way I used to exercise. But I also realized that I was exercising the wrong way prior. Again, I was pushing myself to my limits, like no pain, no gain sort of thing, right? And it was almost like my body just started and my mind just started to resist it, going, no, I'm exhausted. You're not going to slam me around the way you used to do it.
Yeah.
Do you see with, clients that you have, or, what you see with leaders in terms of, when again, when I talk about active recovery, do you see any common kind of, I guess, trends or anything where you can see that they're pushing themselves to the limits, or they're not exercising at all, so they're not getting any form of active recovery or, movement? Like, do you notice anything or anything that's, like in the world we're living in right now, like how busy we all are?
I would say yes. And, I experience that on a personal level as well. What is that balance?
Mm,
And it is a bit of a tightrope sometimes,
mm.
right? Because I think a lot of entrepreneurs do tend to be kind of 100 or zero people. Um, we
Yeah,
we
me
tend to
included.
we definitely are a group that kind of tends to live in extremes. And I think something that I worked a lot with my clients on, and also that I had to really work on with myself, is embracing that things are going to be different around us. And so our bodies are going to be different as well. So it's a similar kind of idea. Um, and learning kind of how hard to push yourself
Mm,
and when to push yourself, I think is very, very important
mm, mm,
because there can definitely be too many liberties taken with I'm tired or I'm in pain or work was really hard today. Therefore, I'm not going to do anything.
mm.
And that's totally fine if it's done occasionally, right? Sometimes that's probably even the healthy thing to do. But when that becomes a habit, or if that tends to be kind of like, oh, well, I fell off the wagon, I might as well just not do anything for the rest of the month. That's where it becomes a problem, I think.
Yeah, I could not agree more, because I feel like, it's like any athlete, right? There's on season, there's, peak seasons and there's off seasons. But
Yep.
there's also this need to, I feel, have, a daily form of movement in terms of the way we're moving our bodies and whatever we're doing, so that we are getting that stepping away from, work and stepping away from our desks. And, it doesn't matter, what shape you're in as such, in terms of, like, whether it's chronic pain or whatever it is, but it's just that ability to be able to do something for yourself that is ensuring that you're actively recovering to
Yeah.
kickstart your day, or to end your day, and that's one thing I've certainly embraced and definitely, taken on board more and more since I've recovered from burnout, that it's less extreme, it's just being more consistent.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And sometimes, I think a lot of these principles are very similar for the chronic pain or just generally the invisible illness community,
Mm,
but it's just scaled back a bit, right? So if someone's in like a really bad kind of systemic flare up, maybe all they can do that day is like some breathing, right? And that's something. And I think building that habit and recognizing that like you're not going to feel motivated to do something every day, but there's a wide spectrum of what that can mean. I think that's really important to get in touch with.
mm. And how much of that do you see as mind over over body? Like, is it like you're obviously working with various clients? Like, is it, do you do a lot of mental fitness as part of, as well as, body fitness as well when you're working with your clients, especially ones with chronic pain?
It's definitely there is a strong psychological component to it because being in pain or feeling, it's being in pain, feeling ill all the time, feeling tired all the time. Um, it is very mentally exhausting.
Mm,
And so there is a heavy psychological component, I would say, to that, especially when we're having bad days,
mm.
or flare-ups or things like that. But in terms of like, I think what a lot of people would think as far as like the mental fitness aspect is almost like no excuses or something like that. And that's definitely not a mentality that I buy into
No,
anymore. Uh,
no, neither.
yeah,
Yeah, neither.
yeah,
So how do you
yeah.
juggle it all then, Mariah? Someone who's experienced chronic pain over the years. Yeah, how do you juggle it all? Like you've got, you're super successful. You've got, these businesses on the go. We've talked around where generally, I call it I'm a type A type of a personality where it's like, yeah, yeah. I have to remind myself some days I can't do everything. It's kind of sometimes I jump into that dark side of flow where you just go, 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 but you got to pull out. How do you
Yeah.
juggle it all? How do you look after you?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think you said something about there being seasons. I think I've really embraced that.
Mm,
Right now is a very this as an example, it's been a very busy quarter for the e-commerce business especially because we're launching a bunch of new products.
mm,
And so I understand that I'm probably not going to make it to the gym or classes as often as I was last quarter, right? And that's totally fine as long as I'm still staying consistent.
mm.
Um, so I think embracing that, I think also understanding like something I've really come to learn over the years is that I don't have to respond or do everything right away. And that was something that I really struggled with earlier in my career was kind of feeling like everything was on fire, everything was an emergency. And yeah, I don't know when exactly that changed, but that has really helped my mental health, I would
Yeah,
say.
100%.
Yeah,
Do you know what
yeah.
I noticed just on that? It's kind of interesting. I don't know if this happens to you at times where you'll look at your schedule for the week and you're just like, holy shit, like how did I let my schedule get like this? Like it's just like there's just heaps going on, right? I talk about oscillating between survival and optimally thriving. And some weeks I look at my schedule and I'm like, Belinda, how did I do this? But then what I notice is I used to get into a real like controlling it all and outcome and 100 miles an hour. But then now I go into my weeks, and I don't know if this happens to you as an entrepreneur, but I'll go, okay, cool. There's a lot here, but I'm just going to see how this just evolves. And like it happened to me this morning. I was looking at my schedule last night, just going, oh, it's a big week ahead. But then all of a sudden this morning, things just started moving without even like me controlling anything. So that's where it's at. There's some beauty in almost surrendering, letting go, but knowing that there's this adaptability. And so some of my space has already been freed up versus thinking
Yeah.
I'm going to have to throw myself out this and work ridiculous hours all week, which is
Mhm.
not good from someone who's had burnout. Does that happen to you, at times with your seasons as well?
Definitely. Yeah. And I think it's interesting. I want to observe a little bit more if some of that falls into place naturally. I do. So I have realized that like I have to prioritize rest.
Mm,
It's just kind of a part of the condition that I have. It's part of,
mm,
a lot of people with chronic pain
mm,
do that. So I am not someone that can go 100 miles an hour for an extended period of time. I get very, very sick usually.
mm,
Um, and so I think that's actually been kind of helpful that I have like a physical limitation on that.
mm,
Um, there was a time in my career where I was, I owned a gym and I was also starting to work in tech and in the startup world. And so
mm,
I was getting up at 5 a.m., teaching a class, going to work, teaching at lunchtime, going back to work, teaching again at night. And that was not a healthy thing to
No.
do. And so now I would say I've built a life around kind of having a little bit more flexibility in my businesses and doing things that bring joy and peace into my life.
Mm.
And that is a very important value for me right now is peace.
I
So, yeah.
could not agree more. And, I
Yeah.
could not agree more. And that's where I go. I have those moments of, oh, I've actually, it's almost like the handbrake comes on for me because it's just like, that wasn't a good place to be in. It took that you ended up there. And I think you're
Mhm.
right around finding that peace and that joy. Versus just it's almost like bad stress versus healthy stress, right? Like you can be healthy stress, like there can be some healthy stress around what you're up to and what you're doing, but there's also that bad stress. So how do you then find the peace and the joy? And what are those daily joyful things that ensure that your cup remains full? Couple of last questions. What do you see as the biggest, I guess, challenge and slash opportunity, if you like, for entrepreneurs right now? Just given the state of the world and everything going on, I know that's a big question, but what do you see as the biggest, yeah, whether it can be a challenge or what are the biggest opportunities?
It's hard because I don't think we've seen the extent of things play out yet. I will say the US is a bit of a scary place to be for small business owners right now.
Mm,
Um, so there's a lot of challenges there, right? And I think it's important to like acknowledge that and be like, this might be a little harder, and like our margins might go down for the next couple years or whatever it is.
mm,
Um, so I think acknowledging that is important.
mm,
I do think there's always opportunity, though, in these times of maybe trying to figure out how to pivot, or if there's something that you feel like you have needed to do, but you haven't had the space to do it because you've just been go, go, go. I think this is a good time to do that.
mm.
Um, and there's a lot of nuance there too, but I won't go into that too much. But yeah, I'm trying to be positive.
I love your positivity though, but I think what you're saying
Yeah.
is like be cognizant of what of the realities of the world and be kind to yourself
Yes.
in terms of if you have a small business, don't lose hope, don't give up, is what you're saying, right? But know
Yeah.
that your margins might go from this percentage to this percentage, and this is
Yep.
just the state of the play. And so
Yeah.
don't lose hope, but also be curious and explore. And this is the time to be experimenting and getting creative. And like, even, with, like, well, what's your product offering? What's your services? Like, what do people need? Do you know what I mean? Like, that's what it feels like you're saying to me, which I think is we can either live in fear, get super stressed, sit on our couches, and kind of be woe me or woe the situation, or we can actually go, okay, that's happening, but what can I do actively for myself, my own business, or kind of in general to like you said at the very start of this pod, take that one step forward.
Yep.
And it's the same in Australia in terms of, as a, small business, it's like, oh my God, what was I thinking 18 months ago, starting my own business? Because, a lot of people said you're super brave for doing it, but there is no alternative for me now. So it's just, it really is, well, how am I taking those steps forward?
Yeah. Exactly. Sometimes it's all you can do, and that's okay. Yeah.
Yeah, totally, totally. And then my final last question, what is your hope for, I guess, people that who have or are suffering through chronic pain or that what you call that invisible illness? What is your hope for them in terms of, again, what's the question there? What's your hope for people with invisible illness in terms of that they can um there is an alternative. Like, I mean, do you know what I'm saying? Like, what's your hope for them? Or what's your
Yeah.
message to them? What's your message? It may not be your hope. What's your message to people that are suffering? and don't feel like they've got any hope.
Yeah, it's a good question, and there's of course different levels of where people are in their pain journey. So um, I'll try to be as inclusive as possible. I think what I mentioned earlier about not being attached to what your body used to be, if you're somebody that maybe was very highly functional and then um, got injured or, developed a condition, not being kind of attached to what you used to be and not waking up every day expecting
Mm,
for your old self to come back.
mm,
I know that was a really, really big turning point for me after my diagnosis, right? And so I think that's been the biggest game changer for me mental health wise, and it took years
mm,
not to wake up every morning and be like, man, I feel this way again, because I was in the background expecting that I was going to feel different.
mm.
And so I think there's an element of radical acceptance there.
I love it.
And that it doesn't mean complacency, but understanding your body and embracing it.
Yeah, I really relate to that. Even like I love that message and that radical acceptance. I love the word radical. I've quite a few people on this pod are using the word radical because we're all, making big change in the world and doing things differently. But I love that because I personally relate to that myself. Once you've had burnout, my doctor said to me ages ago, you'll always have the handbrake that'll come on. And so the person I once was before my burnout is not the same person anymore. So
Yeah.
I can't, work 100 miles an hour like I used to, or 180 miles an hour like I used to, because I just crash. And it's
Yeah.
taken me such a long time to accept that that is not the person I am anymore. And so I really relate to, in a very different way to what you're saying around that radical acceptance and that
Mhm.
giving yourself that grace that it's okay. This is who you are now, and you're still a beautiful, person. Like it's just that this is who you are now. And so why not embrace that?
Yeah. Yeah. And what tools are available to you in your
Yeah,
current state?
yeah. Oh my God, Maria, I'm so grateful for our chat and our conversation today. Where can we find out more about what you're doing? Love to know what you're, even from a musician perspective, where is our best place to find you and look and see what you're up to or continue?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I appreciate it. I think where I keep the most current is on Instagram. So that's at Pain Free Fitness with
Yeah,
underscores in between.
cool.
And then yeah, music wise, it's at Raya Music. So that's my handle there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay, great. All right. Well, I'll share that with the on the notes. And I just want to say thank you so much. Enjoy your Sunday evening, and it was great chatting.
Yeah, agreed.
Thank you.